Hey guys, this is Metal Stash here again, and this video is going to be a revisit of my multiple unit selection video, because some people wanted me to go into a more in-depth description of what is going on and how to set up my scripts to get them to work for multiple unit selection. So this is going to be a step-by-step process of how to create your unit, put the specific scripts, and then how what the scripts are doing and what parts of them are required. So let's go into the project. So in Unity, the first thing I'm going to do is to go up to Game Object and create a simple cube. Then, because Unity's stupid and doesn't put it at a nice spot, I'm going to just set its position to 0, 0, 0, and then I'm going to scale it to 5, 5, 5, and then I'll move its Y position up to 2.5 so that it gets it off underneath the ground. So now that we have a simple cube, I'm going to back up to Game Object and create. I'm using a custom script to do this. Is a custom plane. This is a create plane script. I'll put it linked in the description of where you can find this, because it's extremely useful. You can set how many segments you want in the plane, because I'll show you guys in a little bit. The Unity plane is very high on processing because it's got so many polygons. So I'll create a plane for you guys that's a Unity plane, and you can clearly see the number of polygon difference, and that is extremely process intensive later when I have I've tested with 60 units and it really slows it down, but when I changed it to this, it works really well. So now that we have our cube and plane, I'm going to just drag this plane and put it child under this cube. So now when you move the cube, it moves the plane with it. To center it, I just select the plane. I'm going to set its X and Z to 0, and then take its Y value, set -0.45. Set it to -0.45 because it just offsets it away from the ground just a little bit, so that you don't get intersecting issues where the plane is sometimes visible, sometimes not. So it's just a little bit of an arrow check. Then I'm going to add to the cube, or actually first set the material of the selected plane to be, I guess I'll set it to my selection box, which actually needs to be just a little bit bigger. I guess that's pretty big. Well, then we can see it. There we go. Nice and pretty, isn't it? Not really, it's kind of pixelated, but that's to lower on the processing. So over here, I'm going to start off by adding a rigid body to this, and then set gravity to be off, and you guys add components to objects in Unity by going up to components, and these are basically, they're kind of like built-in scripts or classes that you can add to each object to do different things. Like, you can add a projector or camera to an object instead of creating the physical object. So like, if you added a camera to it, this acts like a player and camera in one object without having to add a whole nother object to it, child it, and all that. So in the rigid body component, I've turned off gravity, and then I also want to freeze every position and rotation so that it's not affected by physics. Kind of gone over this before, but just to reiterate, it freezes the position rotation from physics so that I can control what happens during the collisions. And you normally, if this was a moving unit, I would add a mesh collider to this. You can use a box collider if you're just wanting to select it, because a mesh collider, you turn the convex variable on so that the collisions events do occur. But with box collider, it still collides with like rigid bodies and stuff like that, but it doesn't return like on collision stay events. So going into now my the one script you need to add to the object is a selectable script, and the only thing you need to change on that is its team and alliance to whatever you have set inside the player controller's team and alliance variables. So if those don't match, this cube can't be multiple selected, or selected by the box selection. So then the last thing you need to change on the unit, because I forgot this in the last time I did this, you need to set its layer to selectables, and I don't want to change the child of it because I actually want to change the plane to ignore raycast so that it doesn't run into any processing where somehow the plane is selected, and I just want to select the unit. Now the last thing is set the mesh render for the plane to be off. So that's all you need to do to get the unit to be selected. Now you guys can't necessarily see the plane. Now I explain why you're not seeing the plane at all. I'm going to go into my selectable script. The selectable script just controls whether the unit is being selected or not. So it has a Boolean selected variable that is set to false by default, and then it has team and alliance, has a color array which contains I have three different colors right now that represent three different teams. You kind of have a neutral team, team 1 and team 2. And then on my start function, I set the render's material color to that whatever color ID to the team number. So you come over here to the unit, it gets the render and gets the material, and then sets, actually let's set this material to the normal unit texture I use so that you can see it a little easier. So it gets the material and sets this color to whatever color is identified in color ID. And then this is for minimap, so I'm not going to worry about that line of code, not required for unit selection. So in my update function, I check if it's selected, then it's going to check by finding this selected plane. So what we need to do, I didn't do this, set the name of this to selected plane. So now, if I play this, it's now acting like it should. It gets selected, because the script now finds the selected plane object and sets its mesh render to true, or to be enabled. So I get the mesh render component and check if its enabled state is false. Then I get that same enabled value and set it to true. So if it's turned off and it's supposed to be selected, I just set its state to true. And then otherwise, I do the very opposite. If its enabled state is set to true, but it's not selected, then set its enabled state to false. So that's just turning on and off the mesh render. So it's always there. It's always the child of it, but you don't see it. So just so you guys can see multiple units of this, so I'm not just testing it with one, testing it with a couple of them to see if it actually, does a multiple selection. So you get your single selection here, and then if you drag, select multiples of them. And it works at any angle. So let's go to the player controller script, and the only parts you need to worry about for a unit selection are the parts that I've labeled single unit selection and multiple unit selection. In my single unit selection, all I am using to get a box selection is this initial part where I cast a ray to the ground. So using when the left mouse button is down, that's what this event is checking for. So this gets a 3D point in the world by casting a ray from the camera to the ground. So this selection start variable is actually a 3D vector. And then I also get the screen position by setting the start mouse variable to the input.mouse position variable. So this gets the screen position so that it can draw that nice selection box that you see on the GUI. So then this is a kind of a while event where get mouse button is just a while it's being held down. So this is the initial down event. This is while it's down. This is where you're getting your multiple unit selection thing from. So I check if its distance is greater than a certain amount, just for error checking between start mouse, which is the screen position, and the current screen position. This is used for a later thing. Don't need to have that right now, but all this script is being updated right now, so it's going to be some changes to what I have currently. So then I cast a ray, another ray down to the ground on the where the current mouse position is. And then I clear the selectables, and again I find selection box. Selection box, as you guys know from before, is just a tiny box that is child of the player camera. And for the player, all I have is a camera and the player controller script, nothing else. I truthfully don't even need the box collider, but I'm trying to use that to control the bounds of the map, so leaving that for now. So for you guys to actually get a visual view of what's kind of happening, I'll set the mesh render on the selection box to be true, and then I'm going to do a selection for you guys. So you can actually see the selection box initially sets its position to be that initial ray cast hit, and then as I move away from it, it's going to scale accordingly to it. Now it doesn't line up perfectly, but for my purposes it truthfully works extremely well, and you can kind of visually see more that as the you go either way, it accounts for that pretty quickly, and it doesn't jitter or anything like that, so it works pretty well there. So to get back to how it works, I'm setting the local scale to be 100, which is for me, because I think the selection box is child of the camera and I have the camera rotated down, not fully 90, it's a little bit weird. I can kind of show you guys this. Like if I take, dang it, stupid calling. If I take my X value, which would normally be left and right, is actually going up and down. And then my Y value, if I increase that, is going left and right, which would normally be up and down. And Z has stayed the same. So that's how I figured out my local scaling. So 100 is going to be up and down, 1 just so that it adds a little bit of buffer to it, is going left and right, and then I get the difference between the current hit mouse, which is from that raycast, so it's the current mouse position in 3D points, its Z location, which is forward and backwards, and I subtract the selection start Z's location. Selection start, you guys go back to here, is that initial 3D point that I got from that initial raycast. So then I get the selection box again, I get its position, and I set it to a new vector where it's the same X, same Y, or at least it's from the selection starts, same X and same Y, and then the Z value is changed because normally, I can show you guys this, if I got rid of this, it's pretty simple to see that once the scripts compile and I play the game, the selection box is going to be halfway, about halfway between the, it's going to cover about half of the box. So to account for that, you can take the lossy scale and take the Z value, which is where I adjusted it up here, divide by 2, and add that to the initial position, so that it just moves it down to be where, because the center of the selection box, or the origin, is contained in the center of it, not off to the one side or the other. So you have to account for the size of it. So then I just create a temporary variable to hold the colliders that are returned by the sweep test all function from the rigid body. So I find selection box again, I get its rigid body, and do a sweep test. So that is required within the selection box to have a rigid body, otherwise it wouldn't work. You wouldn't get that selection. So I set this is going to be the direction of the sweep. So it's going to get the mouse's X, which is a left and right position. This is the current position minus the initial position. So if you guys know, final minus initial gets you the resultant of your two vectors. So even if this returns negative, it still works. So like when you're selecting this way, it still works because if it's a negative X value, it's still going to sweep in the left direction. If it's a positive X value, it's going to sweep test in the right direction. And let me save that so that it fixes the offset again. And then I'm going to find, this is the distance that sweep test all does. You guys can actually look at how sweep test works by going into the script reference, going into the rigid body class, and then finding the sweep test all function. You can look at its parameters. It takes a direction and a distance. So if you get the absolute value of those, that gives you a distance. So then for every one of those, I check if it's got a selectable component. That's where I get transformed, I get component selectable, and I also check if the team is the same as the player's current team. So then I add it to the selectable array, or I add its collider, so that I don't have to later do like dot collider dot get component. I can just do the array, whatever position dot get component. It's just a little tweak to it. So then I set the selectable component selected variable to true. So over here, the selected variable is now set to true, so it's going to set the mesh render on the selected plane to be true. So then this is used for my GUI, so it's not needed for multiple selection. And so then my last thing, if when the left mouse button is up, it sets the scale of this to 111 and sets its position to 000. So that is basically how I get a multiple unit selection. Alright, so I hope this clarified any issues with doing this, or any problems if it wasn't clear enough. If you guys have any more questions with this, or having problems with using the scripts that I have, please ask me, because I'm more than happy to answer your questions. So thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for the request to try to be more clear on my descriptions. So see you guys later, and have a good day.